The most violent Hells Angels hitman, Canada's worst serial killer. Enter the horrific realm of Canada's worst serial killer, the Hells Angels hitman. Reveal the sinister motivations and brutal tactics of this infamous killer who terrorized and killed illegal motorcycle gangs. Canada's worst serial killer, the Hells Angels hitman, came from the shadows of the country's criminal underground. In this unsettling account, the heinous deeds committed by a brutal killer who used the Hells Angels name and symbol. This serial killer's trail of death and dread horrified the nation because it was motivated by wealth, power, and a cold-blooded drive to eliminate opponents. One of the most infamous outlaw motorcycle gangs in history, the Hells Angels, first arrived in Canada in the 70s. The club's reputation for brutality and organized crime helped it gain popularity and power, and it soon had branches in many major American cities. A hitman would eventually appear in this evil setting, and he would leave behind a trail of fear in his wake. The secret past of a monster. The history of the Hells Angels assassin was initially cloaked in mystery, but a disturbing pattern of terrible murders eventually surfaced. This killer worked within the club's close-knit brotherhood, blending in with and taking advantage of the motorcycle culture. His victims, who were mostly members of rival gangs, informants, or anybody else he deemed a threat, were up against a ruthless and lethal foe. A state of emergency. Panic spread across Canada as the death toll rose. It was difficult for police authorities to identify and catch the hitman due to his crafty methods and the Hells Angels' clout within the criminal underground. The potential victims felt even more defenseless and terrified by his ability to strike undetected. Despite the assassin's evasive measures, the persistent law enforcement and the diligent efforts of determined investigators began to unravel the case. As further details emerged, a disturbing portrayal of a cold-blooded killer developed, one who had planned each of his or her crimes with great care. The incredible truth. The news that a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang was responsible for Canada's worst serial killings rocked the country. The news media and the general public were confronted with the grim truth that a cold-blooded killer was embedded within a notorious criminal organization. In search of justice. The killer's name was revealed, prompting a massive manhunt across the country. After years of suffering and loss, the victims' loved ones hoped that justice would finally be served by apprehending this monster. Canada's worst serial killer belonged to the Hells Angels, and his narrative is a bleak one, as this article has shown. His criminal history is a sobering reminder of the lows to which human beings can sink when protected by criminal organizations. Scars from his reign of terror will always be with us, but the determination of law enforcement and the fortitude of the communities he affected are a testament to the triumph of good over evil. Canada's province of Quebec saw a horrific gang war between two illegal motorcycle gangs, the Hells Angels and the Outlaws, in the late 1970s. The lucrative drug traffic in the area was at the heart of the dispute. Hundreds of people, including innocent bystanders, were killed as the feud rapidly escalated. A member of the Hells Angels named Yves Apache Trudeau was at the epicenter of this bloody conflict. Trudeau was the deadliest serial killer in Canadian history because he was responsible for 18 of the Outlaws' 23 deaths. He earned the fearsome moniker Apache because of his infamous lack of morals and disregard for human life. Trudeau was a seasoned assassin who could kill with a variety of gruesome techniques. His favorite tactic was explosives, but he also used firearms, beatings, stabbings, and strangulation. He was such an accomplished bomb thrower that he could eliminate his enemies without raising suspicion. He was an even more dangerous and dreaded hitman since he would not hesitate to kill anyone connected to his victims, including family members or prospective witnesses. Trudeau was betrayed by his former motorcycle brethren despite his loyalty and service to the Hells Angels. He narrowly avoided being killed by his erstwhile allies by using their own paranoia and cunning against them. Biker violence in Quebec can be traced back to the Great Darkness era of social and political upheaval that lasted from 1936 until 1960. The National Union Party strictly enforced Catholic and traditionalist values throughout its time in power in Quebec, but when the Liberals of Quebec took office, they instituted widespread changes that ultimately influenced a cultural shift. Teenage pregnancy and drug use skyrocketed as a result of this increasing hedonism among rebellious youth encouraged by the newer liberal culture. Young males looking for an outlet for their desire to defy authority often turned to the outlaw motorcycle subculture. One such group was the Popeyes Moto Club, based in Montreal and notorious for their involvement in drug trafficking and contract killings among other illegal activities. Their There was the first major biker gang war in Canadian history, and it involved the Hells Angels, the Outlaws, the Satan's Choice, and the other gangs from the United States competing for territory and dominance. Trudeau became notorious as a key player in the biker battle and the Popeyes' main assassin. Both sides suffered significant casualties and were subjected to harsh crackdowns by law enforcement during the 2-year struggle, which ultimately ended in a stalemate. The Outlaws were forced to leave Quebec after the Hells Angels established themselves as the dominant group. Trudeau's criminal career didn't end after the war. He joined the West End Gang, an Irish-Canadian organization that ran the port of Montreal and had ties to the Hells Angels. Trudeau gained even more infamy as he masterminded the execution of 4 West End gang murderers who had betrayed their commander. As a result of the biker war and Trudeau's actions, Canadians now have a clearer picture of the deadly and secretive world of outlaw motorcycle gangs. During that time of upheaval, illicit activities like drug trafficking and contract killing were brought to light. Gerald Gallant, a Canadian assassin, has pleaded guilty to 27 counts of first-degree murder, 12 counts of attempted murder, and additional offenses. Canadian hitman Gerald Gallant pled guilty to first-degree murder charges for his role in 27 planned murders. He was also charged with other crimes associated with his illegal activities and admitted to trying to murder 12 people. Killings of biker gang, mob, and street gang members in Quebec took place between 1978 and 2003. Killing members of motorcycle gangs, mobsters, and others linked with street gangs in Quebec, Gallant was responsible for a string of homicides over a quarter century, from 1978 to 2003. A violent and protracted struggle between biker gangs in the province led to these deaths. From around 1994 to 2002, the biker war between the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine gangs saw a sharp increase in fatalities. The Hells Angels and the Rock Machine motorcycle gangs fought bloodily over drug trafficking territory from 1994 to 2002, a period that saw a considerable increase in bloodshed. The murders in Gallant were associated with this period of violent gang fighting in Quebec. A waitress and a private investigator were among the unintentional victims of Gallant's strikes. During the commission of his crimes, Gallant's victims were not necessarily the ones he had in mind. Victims of his violence included uninvolved onlookers. Helene Brunet, a waitress, was wounded in Gallant's assassination attempts, and Luc Bergeron, a private detective, was also caught in the gunfire. Gallant, now 58 years old, publicly expressed regret and asked for forgiveness from the families of the victims in a tribunal in Quebec City. In a prepared speech he read in court, he expressed regret for the agony and suffering he caused them. He understood that forgiving him could be challenging, or even impossible, but he was nevertheless eager to work with law enforcement to make amends for his wrongdoing. Thanks to his assistance with law enforcement, 10 people with ties to a biker gang that was responsible for killing scores of people were apprehended. Gallant made a dramatic about-face and decided to help the authorities out. The authorities were able to apprehend 10 people with ties to multiple biker gang murders because of his cooperation and the information he provided. The victims' loved ones were able to find some peace and justice thanks to everyone's cooperation. One of Canada's most notorious murderers, Gallant, will be eligible for release after just 25 years. While in prison, he will be entitled to certain privileges and will be shielded from the public. Gallant will not serve any more time in prison beyond his current life term, despite his involvement in multiple horrible crimes, including 27 first-degree murders. Within 25 years, he can seek parole. He will not be able to profit from his criminal record, but he will be entitled to certain privileges and safeguards during his incarceration as part of the plea agreement. Thanks for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you want to watch more videos like this.